when dealing with when dealing with the whole aspect of context matters. What context do we put it in? When we deal with that. Give me 1 second. Yeah. So yeah. Keisha, big up yourself for letting me know that I literally was not streaming on the YouTube. I would probably say Kevin, but I think I'm gonna leave that one alone. Yeah, but so how critical and how significant it is to understand what autonomy means, especially in law, self autonomy. Before I even go into definitions, I just want there to be an appreciation of one particular thing. And again, people on YouTube, I apologize for the late start in terms of the stream. And so you might have missed. I'm going to go over to tell you that we are talking about the concept. Yeah, we're talking about the context of autonomy, consent. These things overlap with violence against women. These things is in the context that we start the year off in Jamaica with the murder rate being over 33. In particular, this morning, a female attorney was murdered, assassinated. I'm going to take it that high because she was driving to work and her car was shot up by men on motorbikes. How Jamaica will deal with that we will see. But it's in that vein that it has brought me to use this show and use this platform to speak about autonomy. And I'm going to start by saying, because I want to have a conversation about it. So I'm not just going to go into the philosophical part of it. But the idea of autonomy goes back to, everybody, if you know me, I'm passionate about the Constitution and all of that. Well, autonomy is a concept that we love to talk about sovereignty. We are a sovereign nation and we make our own decisions. And so the forefathers of the world, if you know anything about patriarchy, they coined autonomy to be an idea that every nation was independent, self-sufficient, and could make decisions without influence or being affected by what was happening in the outside world. If we look what's happening in Israel and Hamas and how nations respond and the sides being taken from outside influences, you get an idea that autonomy is something that we should question. Even before that, when you think about the Caribbean nations and you think about the Commonwealth, and then you have the idea of the head of state being outside of the country, then you have a full appreciation that when you think about autonomy for certainly a Caribbean nation, we saw what Barbados did and we know what Jamaica wants to do. Yvonne Brown, Yvonne, big up yourself. Annette, I see y'all. I'm just trying to put some context to the context matters so far. And we literally now have to have an appreciation that do even we as human beings have autonomy? Well, for the criminal law and for law in general to make any sense, it is founded on the view, the belief, the thought, the idea that persons are indeed, that they do have autonomy. So there is something called the Kantian authority. Kantian is Kant is a philosopher, and so a person is autonomous only if his choices and actions are unaffected by factors that are external. So you must have an internal locus of control to exercise autonomy. Well, if you there is in inessential to yourself. So a person lacks autonomy or is heteronymous to the extent that his choices or actions are influenced by factors such as a convention, peer pressure, legal or religious authority, the perceived will of God, or even his own desires. So that desires are inessential to the self is shown by the fact that, unlike the self, they are contingent on the situation in which one finds oneself. Example, a person who is living in the 18th century would not have a desire to own a personal computer. And a person living in the 21st century would not, at least not ordinarily, have a desire to use a chamber pot. Unless, of course, you come from St. Thomas and, so you have to use the ring and guard up the ring and them little things there. But that's another thing, because, so Obia still are going on. We still have the Obia Act on the books. But, all right. A person whose situation and desire changes, however, does not thereby become a different person. So even if the desires in question are not the product of one's social environment, but instead arise from one's physiology, they are still inessential to the person who has them. So a person who likes caviar but dislikes lobster would not become a different person if he were to acquire a taste for lobster and lose his taste for caviar. You would still be the same person, but you change in term, whether by personal autonomy or by influence by other people. So we have to consider that or think about that. Now, in contrast, let's think about rationality. It is in an essential feature of the self, according to Kant. So a person will be autonomous with respect to his choices and actions if they are directed solely by his rationality. So Kant is clear that this does not mean that a person is autonomous if he acts rationally to achieve some external end. Example, to satisfy a desire to eat caviar. We're using caviar because no say if it's KFC, mean an autonomy, and then it won't make no sense. All right, so to act in this way is merely to act on what Kant called a hypothetical imperative, a rule of the form. So if you want to achieve X, you should do Y. Because actions that are guided by hypothetical imperatives are motivated by desire, and they cannot be performed autonomously. So to act rationally in the sense that grounds ascriptions of autonomy, therefore, a person must act according to a rule that would be valid for all similarly situated rational agents, regardless of their desires. Somebody say, hold on, I said I'm going to. All right, Andrew says she's going for a book and pencil. And try, and that today is supposed to be light. Big up yourself, Stir Gang. Big up yourself, everybody on TikTok, Reggae Global Radio, especially. I know you're listening. I know you're tuned in, watching. If you're driving home, don't drink, don't drive. Be careful. Silda Williams, I seen you straight out of the UK. Big up yourself. And to everybody, just follow. It's supposed to be light, so if you need your pen and pencil and your paper and all of that, that means it's heavy stuff. But I just want you to have an appreciation of where we're going with this autonomy thing. So because actions that are guided by hypothetical imperatives are motivated by desire, they cannot be performed autonomously. So think on that. So to act rational in the sense that grounds ascriptions of autonomy, therefore, a person must act according to a rule that would be valid for all similarly situated rational agents, regardless of their desires. So this requirement is expressed in general terms in Kant's categorical imperatives. So one version of which is act only according to that maxim by which you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal moral law. That is a law that every similarly situated rational agent should follow. So a person whose actions were guided by the categorical imperative could not gain an advantage. For example, because he could not consistently will that everyone should follow the rule, lie when it is to your advantage to do so. So if everyone did follow this rule, then no one would trust the word of anyone else, and no one, including the person contemplating the lie, would be able to reap the benefits of lying. So think about that in context, that this idea of autonomy, is, to me, is a false narrative, because autonomy entails acting in accordance with the categorical imperative. And moreover, because an autonomous agent recognizes his intrinsic value as a rational being, he must also recognize the intrinsic value of all other rational beings. And because there is no relevant difference between his rational agency and that of others, an autonomous agent therefore will always treat rational beings as ends in themselves, i.e., as intrinsically valuable, and never merely as means, as instrumentally valuable. So Kant expressed this conclusion in a second version of the categorical imperative, which he considered to be equivalent to the first. So act as to treat humanity, whether in your own person or in another, always as an end and never only as a means. All right, so I know this is heavy stuff. You're free to ask the questions. I'm paying attention to the comments to be able to answer that. So remember, I'm telling you, if the criminal law is guided by the view that we are autonomous beings, you're going to see where I'm going when it comes to consent. Because it is so important that we appreciate that when we have the freedom to make choices, and when we make choices, if there are systems in place to bully you, to gag you, to prevent you from even your freedom of expression, then it is a restriction on your autonomy, your freedom to make decisions for yourself, and those being rational. I say all clean services speaking about John Locke, but we're actually talking about Immanuel Kant right now as we're speaking. But it means your mind is in the right place, because John Locke did counter a lot of what Immanuel Kant has posited in his works. All right, so if we are to use autonomy as the basis that we are free beings to make choices for ourselves, then you can appreciate that if a man get paid some money and him pull up on a bike and happen to shoot somebody or murder somebody, then he is to be exposed to the full arm of the law and shouldn't be saying it's somebody that make me do it. Especially when you're dealing with contract killing, or you find yourself, you say you're in a gang or whatever it is that people do these days. The decision to join a gang or the decision to take the money to go and hurt somebody is your choice, because you're autonomous, and therefore you can be brought before the court. And when you're brought before the court, you get a provided that you get a fair trial in reasonable time with a competent jury, or in the alternative, a judge who sits alone and try you, and whatever the verdict is, it's done with your constitutional rights intact. Then the full arm of the law is there for you. And the exceptions would be if you are insane, and then you have the defense of insanity, or the same thing they were talking about autonomy. Well, there's something called automatism, where people use reflex actions and crimes are committed, but it is a breach of your free will and your autonomy because you did it without thought. And the criminal law is also based on intention, mens rea and actus reus, and they must come together in the absence of defense for you to be found criminally liable. But we're going somewhere with this because R. Kelly did us well. It's not, R. Kelly wrote a song for Aaliyah, "May Her Soul Rest in Peace," that speaks about age ain't nothing but a number. So if age ain't nothing but a number, then certainly we have to speak about consent. Blessings, Delroy Henry. Kevin Wright say you cannot make any choice. Well, I don't believe that. I believe that even where destiny is concerned or fatalism is concerned, there is some free will in some of the things that we're doing. And sometimes we make choices, but if we are living in between what we are ordained to do by God, there are some things we do. That is why some of the great men, Martin Luther King, I'm not gonna single out anybody. I only call his name because his birthday was is somewhere around or his time. And I raise him because there were many things said about his conduct, but it doesn't take away from his greatness and his contribution in terms of what his destiny was, what his private and personal life was, maybe a little bit questionable here and there, but one cannot take away from what he was destined to do. And provided that you carry out your destiny, the rest is probably just obiter, things said and done by the way, and shouldn't take away from the value that you are. So I just want to know if you guys are with me so much. Kishendo, I see you. Um, yeah, Tracy, and big up yourself. I see you as well. Latoya Johnson, blessings. Yeah, so that's where we are in terms of autonomy. Now, here's the trick. Um, I wanted to also speak about I want to speak about consent because that's the next place that I certainly want to take the conversation, and it has to deal with consent. Now, in Jamaica, the age of consent is 16 years of age. I want to know by way of the comment section, what do you think about consent and the age? Because age of consent is the law, and there are people who have moral questions about it. And so there is consent, and there's something called consensual non-consent, and I want to talk about them because I think that we sexual maturity is lacking in many spaces, and people will bring in all kinds of things, and um then you find yourself where you might be a pastor and you find yourself saying, have you ever been swallowed up by the Holy Spirit, of course, and then a 5-second clip becomes something to mock all other things. Fatima says the age is ridiculous. Yes, Serene. So the age of consent for both sexes is 16. Um, Big up yourself, Gainel. So naturally, the real question is, should the age what should the age of consent be? And then I'm seeing all kind of things saying the age of consent was 18. Wonder why it dropped to 16. In Jamaica, it always was 16. So I don't know where you got the 18 from. And in the United States, different states have different age, different cultures. Some cultures, the age starts at bar mitzvah and bath mitzvah. I'm not too au fait with that, so I can't really speak on it. But on a world level, maybe, as Pat said, the age should be 18. But then what about the idea and concept that in some countries, though you can go and fight war at 18, but you can't drink till you're 21. So these ages are guides in terms of the law, what the law thinks in terms of development generally for people. But no matter how you feel about it, consent as it is right now is um, the reality is it is actually 16 in the Jamaican space, which means that if a person says yes, then they're consenting, assuming that we accept that autonomy, somebody has the autonomy to make decisions for themselves. If that is the case, then the consent applies, and those who feel how they feel can cease from fabricating and calling what is consensual sex rape. which is something that happens many times. All right, so you have informed consent, you have consent simpliciter, you have many types of consent that is out there. So you have valid informed consent, and it must include three major elements: disclosure of the information, competency of the patient or the segregate to make a decision, and three, the voluntary nature of the decision. So if you notice the things that is needed for valid informed consent, you have to know exactly what it is you're consenting to. It's just like signing a contract. You have to know, you have to be informed of the content and the context before you go ahead and say, this is what I want to do. So if you want to think about the three types, so you have implied consent, express consent, informed consent, and unanimous consent. But notice it says implied consent. All right, let me give you an example. So let me the realistically, and when it comes into the court of law, a lot of differences happen. But if you are if I'm at home and you call me 3 a.m. in the morning, or even 5 o'clock in the morning, and you want to come on my yard, there's an assumption that you obviously coming to do something other than coming to my yard. That is a concept that there is implied consent, because culturally there is something known as the booty call. And so after 12 o'clock, somebody call and say, hey, are you up? What are you doing? The response, obviously, if you're going to come to my yard after them in booty call hours, that there's a consent that you come into my house. The new people say Netflix and chill or whatever, Amazon Prime and wine. I don't know, whatever the catchphrases are. You get the concept of implied consent. Express consent, which is the one that is always necessary, is especially in the sexual context, is to ensure that you ask and you get the yes, definitive yes, for each step of it. There are some technicalities now in the law where you have person saying, well, women who can consent, we'll talk about vitiation of consent, but consent can be vitiated at any time. Even so, even where a woman says to a man, yes, we can have sex, when she says stop, anything after the time she says stop, and when she withdraws her consent, would be considered rape. So the importance of knowing what consent is is important. Yeah, so that is so important in terms of understanding where we're going with the conversation. I see persons are saying Anne Marie says, no, if I come into your house, I'm just bringing 6 pieces of KFC. So it doesn't mean anything other than that. K-Max says, Dugu Dugu has so many consequences and there are so many gray. And there are so many grayback men and women who sit waiting until the clock strikes 16 to prey on the vulnerable youth. All right, so that comment there is a moral one, because if 16 is the age of consent, then the next question is, why do you care? There's no law being broken. If there is a problem with the law, then one should fix it. And so, yes. Anne Marie, somebody says, in relation to the 6 piece, it would be known as sexual grooming, except there's a legal definition for that. So we won't go there. But what we're saying then, because I'm seeing the moral, I'm looking at the comments and I'm seeing the moral positions being made, and the moral positions are outside of what the law allows for. So we're making that clear. I had initially, let me see if I can find it. Let me see. I crave your indulgence. Yeah, let me just pull it up. Okay. It was just here. Mhm. Ah, all right. While I work on that. So KMC says not even 18, but at least those are almost adults. This is very interesting because K Mac is struggling with the fact that 16 is actually the age of consent. And so you can see right there and then where there is a struggle to accept that if that is if you're unhappy with the age of consent being what it is, then the next thing for you to actually do is to naturally petition for the law to change. I know no other way that you're going to make that work except for that. So I don't know if you can be appreciative of that aspect of it. But certainly, oh, I'm not struggling. I think it shouldn't be. Exactly. So that's where the struggle is, because it is. And so what you are doing is depriving somebody of their sexual autonomy, because at 16 a person can decide that I want to have sex with whoever I'm having sex with. And once I provide the consent, it doesn't even matter what the law thinks, because it's okay. But somebody gonna say it's not okay because of the we have moral and ethical standards that sometimes don't match along with the law. For instance, in on many platforms and in many programs, there are persons who are concerned that the Speaker of the House in Jamaica is the wife of the Prime Minister, and even though it is legal, there are persons saying that it should not be done when you use legal channels. And Jill Forbes says, can a 16-year-old be charged for sleeping with a 15-year-old who is out of the consenting age? And the answer to that is yes, because the 15-year-old is incapable of giving consent, and that would actually be having sex with a person under the age of 16 in the Jamaican space. So that's how the law regulates it, and that's how tricky it is when you start to actually apply the law. No. Um, what you will tend to find now is this can be somewhat comical, but there is many questions about what is the appropriate age, because certainly celebrities, whether it be women, they date younger men, and it is acceptable, and men date younger women. What happens is it's a matter of preference and what we spoke about autonomy. And so in that autonomy is the freedom to choose, and you are choosing. um Tiffy says legal doesn't always mean right. Tell that to the law, because the law is saying that it actually does. If it is the law, then it has to be right, and until it is challenged or changed. Now, here's the thing. This is simply what it is. Age 25, you can substitute it for age 16. And she says, I consent. And the male says, I can consent too. And so put it in context. This is the comic aspect of it, and this is the comment section versus two people and the privacy of their home. So let's put it in context. Age 16 says I consent, and age 16 right up to 100 says I consent too. Two adults who are legally capable of consenting have consented to sex. Two persons who are under the law able to consent to sex are engaging in sexual intercourse, and therefore the third person says, I don't. You, and derogative words, out here dating little girls to avoid grown women pressure. And in the comic you can see the lady being a little bit upset that at age 38, a 38-year-old man would want to date somebody younger. And so it's behind you. And you can actually see it. So this play, um, and that's a good question. Was the law, Ian says, was the law structured to facilitate the ladies' most fertile and productive years, since menopause pose an in hindrance to population growth? That's what was said. And then Joe Forbes says the 38-year-old woman looks over 60. She should retire. Well, these things are all subjective, but what we're saying is after there is consent, um, is it okay for a third party to have to put their moral external locus of control on persons who intrinsically have decided that they want to consent? And notice that the conversation is centered, and rightly so, if you are in Jamaica, around the female as opposed to any protection where the male is concerned. That is something that you also have to look at, because once persons reach the age of consent, where do we find it to be inappropriate? Only for girls, or is it older men to younger women, or are we equally saying when it comes to consent it should go the same way? Should we set a 7-year difference in age for it to be appropriate? Should an 84-year-old man marry a 22-year-old woman? And some will say, why not? Because he's going to kick the bucket at 90 and might leave her everything. When people are able to make decisions for themselves, our person supposed to be a part of it. And so Serene Sue says, no one protect boys from cougars. And then Kevin Wright speaks about mentally mature. That is the standard. And Nordia says the woman looks like a certain person. Um, this thing was taken off the internet, so I don't know if the characters look familiar. I don't know. I don't know. So somebody says, Tiffy says it's inappropriate across the board, um, and also crazy. And Miss Labiche says, well, it's just bad mind. I don't know. Bad mind as in the older lady is bad minding the young girl. You see, this is interesting and very subjective. So that's really what it is. Keisha, you can pin the topic for me. So yeah, so that's the idea now when it comes to consent, and I'm going to leave that there a bit in terms of trying to grapple with what we're talking about. Greetings, JM Master Songwriter. So we're talking, if we accept the idea of autonomy and accept the idea of consent, then where does the moral table lie? And what shouldn't we be teaching our children, um, how to access consent, um, and how to deal with the contract that is consent? For instance, should we be discussing the rules of consent? Um, should we do that? For instance, one, should we establish boundaries, communicate through comfort zones, ask every time, check in regularly, and respect each other? And if your boundaries have been violated, then what do you do? Should these be rules that we are teaching our children? Should it be something adopted in society? Should it be both legal and moral? That is it. And Tommy says, what are we consenting to? That is it. So really, when we speak about consent, we are actually speaking about informed consent, and that is definitely where we need to go with it. Speaking about informed consent. So once we are clear, autonomy is one space. What do we mean by autonomy? Well, if autonomy is a freedom to make decisions for yourself, then put the sexual before it, and sexual autonomy is the right and freedom to choose your partner. The right to say, this is my body, this is what I will allow you to do, and this is what I will allow you to not do. It is in that vein that the law protects even the lady of the night, or if there is such thing as the gentleman of the night. They are protected by virtue of being able to use the powerful word that is known as no. And somebody would say, but what does no mean? Well, no means no, right? Are we good with that? There's absolutely no excuse, not at all. No means no. And don't confuse with KNOW. No just simply means no. And that is what is important. So if consent is permission for something to happen or agreement to do something, um, no change may be made without the consent of all the parties. Um, so even where you're in a car, you're driving the car, police stop you, and it said, you were speeding. Just open the door and let me check. I want to check the trunk, and if you're not doing anything, sir, then you shouldn't have a problem. Are you gonna consent to the search? You said no. Once you say no, anything after that would be a violation of your rights, and that you saying no does not give rise to suspicion. So the power of the word no is saying, I do not consent. Then there's a situation where these are the days of our lives. The police want your DNA. So they says, your daddy ain't your daddy and your daddy don't know, and we need your DNA to prove that that is so. Are you going to consent to the DNA, or are you going to say no? Well, if you say no, the act allows for them to take your DNA by force. And when they take your DNA, it is on the basis that a crime was committed and it's needed to facilitate that. Otherwise, they're breaching your constitutional rights to privacy. If they're saying your daddy ain't your daddy ain't your daddy and your daddy ain't no, but they think they know, then they're also breaching the family life. and they may be destroying a family by trying to do that. So that's how important no means no, and giving consent as well as informed consent. Because if they're not telling you why and the reasons for why they're doing what they're asking you to give consent to, then they cannot get informed consent, because you don't know the all the reasons why they're asking for it. So even then, consent in law, whether by tort or criminal, is simply means that a person voluntarily and willfully agrees in response to another person's proposition. So the person who consents must possess sufficient mental capacity, and consent also requires the absence of coercion, fraud, or error. So consent is an essential constituent of a contract and a defense to a tort. Good. And the lack of it will have you before a criminal court trying to explain yourself how it is that you got consent to do that which you are not supposed to do. And usually consent is the bedrock of rape cases. The lack of consent is where rape falls in. And yes, Tammy, no means I have not given you permission to do what it is you had asked me to do. And then consent also requires that the person is of legal age to give consent. And we did say that the legal age of consent is 16. So that was very important in terms of dealing with the aspect of consent. Now, Kevin says, but the NSA watch, track, and collect data on everyone in the world, and you can't say no. Well, they collect it, but what are they doing with it that has any effect on you? I mean, we have cell phones, so we don't assume that the issue in terms of privacy where that is concerned. I always say if I'm having a conversation with somebody, I just assume that there are third parties listening. So your ears full, your eye full, your belly full, whatever it is, that's on you. However, the use of that information is still protected by the Constitution wherever it is. So there'll be situations where people know, and I know, you know, and you know, I know, but I waited on you to use the information that you say you know, that I know, that you know, so I can take you to the court and do what I need to do to get my compensation. And it is no defense by collecting information by violation, because that is what fairness is, and the Constitution allows for fairness, especially if it's you collect data illegally to try to get somebody to answer to the law. You're breaking the law to get somebody to answer to the law. We have to do away with that kind of criminal behavior all across the world. Certainly in the United States, they have fruits of the poisonous tree, and in many countries, the Constitution has advanced the position that you cannot go around and circumvent the law and the right to privacy in an effort to get people in trouble. So yeah, sexual grooming is one aspect of it, but when we're talking about 16-year-olds, and then there's a breach where police is saying, open your phone so we can see the conversations that you and the 16-year-old is having, to make a determination that the sex was by coercion or whatever. And then, parents, again, I spoke about the video where the mother was stepping in the girl's neck. And I'm certain when CPSFA finds that child, the child must have suffered from some form of brain damage, because the mother had stepped in her neck. So there are assumptions being made that the little girl was maybe a little bit force ripe and probably had found herself in a sexual situation. These are just speculations. And the moral disappointment from the mother would have caused her to say, oh, you turn big woman, and treat her accordingly. But corporal punishment is not the way to deal with that. And sexual immaturity certainly can cause disaster. Joe Forbes says, right now, JA needs to focus on enforcing the rather than changing it. From Jamaica, grown men have been messing with young girls and nothing done. All right, I can accept that. I can agree with that. But as we're speaking, the CPSFA is investigating a prominent school for sexual misconduct, by persons in authority. And of course, the big letdown is if you enforce the age of 16 and protect the persons, then that is where it starts. JM says, she says, Miss B said 16 is too young. Now, what about the 14, 15, 13, 12 who are being abused and there's no regulation where that is concerned? How do we deal with that? Well, we're not just dealing with the aspect of how we feel morally. We're dealing with the way how persons can also manipulate, because even after consent is given, it's so easy in terms of where the law is for somebody to say, well, I withdrew my consent, and having withdrawn my consent, I feel like I was raped. And that opens this discussion of the age old, why there's a necessity for trials, and why sexual autonomy is so important, because a woman can say, I agreed to missionary, but I didn't agree to, gonna say it, the back shot. And then there is case law that speaks about that, and we can get into that. But Kevin, you just hell bent on fertility. There's a little bit more nuance in terms of, just even without speaking of fertility, is more to speak about the ability to exercise free choice and have sexual autonomy over one person, over a person's body. When and we must appreciate this, because abortion is a very, 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 very loaded and sensitive topic. I'm not touching it save and except for when a woman says, it's my body, it's my choice. That is the age old Joe, what is it, Roe versus Wade. And when it was struck down by the courts, and where are we now, and abortion rights and all of that, this is about autonomy, the freedom to choose. And if we agree with it, then we have to regulate it accordingly. The thing about it is, again, when we go to the I consent, we have to look at it in its proper context, because there are times when there was consent, and then because people don't get their way, they say it is rape. Monica Will says those are rape. 13 to 16 is rape. Well, after 16 is lunchtime. Even though the clock says after 12 is lunchtime, but that in this conversation, 16 is lunchtime, as in it is okay once consent is given at 16. So Ian says a woman has the right to determine what she grows inside her body. That is well accepted, fully accepted. There's no argument with that. But similarly, a man has the right to say no. A man has the right to not engage in sexual intercourse with the woman, even when they're not married. If he says no, no means no. And every time it's a social contract, to the point that every time that there is going to be um sexual intercourse, there should be a conversation, and express consent is to be given. And express consent, when given for missionary, is not express consent for any other style that comes with it. Different positions require, and you are supposed to, in keeping with the rules that I had laid down earlier, is to have communication, find out if the person is still comfortable, find out if the person is all right, because the minute consent is vitiated, including, it must come by trickery. So there are a plethora of cases where the dentist tricked the person to say the only way to cure your sinus is through oral sex, and I'm constrained to do it, and then that was a trick. Or singers are told by their voice coaches that in order to sing better, they have to open up your windpipes and this, and or twins would have tricked a woman, vice versa. Twin women trick the man and before you know it, there's a lot of trickery, and the law is set out clearly in terms of how you can use even force and pressure. And if it's done that way, like for instance, if you're working at a workplace and your boss pressures you and you feel like you're not going to get your pay and stuff like that, and so you do it because you want to keep your job, that's not consent, it's possibly rape. And people will say, no, she licky licky, and if I did me, and it goes belly up when we get to when we get to that type of conversations. But the important thing is not to miss the idea. So while we're wrapping up the first hour of the show, we're appreciating several things. One, the age of 16 is consent. If it is that the woman says, I consent, and the man says, I consent too, and they decide that they're going to have sex, then all who say, I don't consent, and you all out here dating little girls to avoid grown women pressure, you need to stop it. It's not good. It's morally irreprehensible. And what about me? I'm 33, or whatever they say. And as Miss Labiche had said, bad mind, the old woman, them bad mind, and the old man, them bad mind, because them can't keep up. But um, we go to the adage, every maca have them sticker bush, and if the maca consent to the sticker bush, mind your business. And then we'll talk about when not possibly rape, it's called statutory rape. Statutory rape would be under the age of 16. So Percy White says, I still think age of consent should be age 18, just as how they only allowed to vote at 18. And then we go to what Angel said, total nonsense, but the age to drink alcohol is 18, other places 21. And so is the age just a marker and no reflection of sexual maturity? What if you're in a nation similar to Jamaica, where the the concept or the idea of sex is not so open, and so there's a little bit of sexual education is a problem in terms of how people speak about it. And then when you look at the dynamics of it, not enough communication, and because of that, we still have high rates of teenage pregnancies. We still have to deal with or contend with STDs and stuff like that in a overworked and overwhelming health system, and we still don't have proper public education when dealing with all of this. So the morality not marching along with the law, and where does morality have a space in how we prosecute, in how we treat with consent, and the possible when consent is vitiated, which is withdrawn. That is a thing, and we'll address further after the commercial break. You're tuning into Context Matters with Isa Buchanan on Reggae Global Radio, and we're going to do some housekeeping business and return at the top of the hour. It's 6 p.m. Yeah. So yeah, guys, that's basically what's happening. And I mean, we would talk really about Blessings Kim. The case who says, Isa, please explain why women in JA do not have the autonomy to tie their tubes. If they do not want more children, why do they need husband's permission? I was not aware that you needed your husband permission to tie your tube, but I do know that if you're married, it would be a good place to start to have the conversation. And women in Jamaica do have sexual autonomy, and them tie them tube and them do all kind of things to themselves. If you can go on a plane and go to Brazil and put plastic in your derriere and flatten your belly and move the fat around your body as you want, who say you can't tie it to? I think that's a misconception, because there's no law that prevents you from doing what you want with your body. It's your body. Well, I know we have abortion laws in Jamaica, strict abortion laws in Jamaica. But outside of that, you can do what you want. Kevin said reproduction is a clear purpose of life. Donna says, so all the young ladies that have babies under the age of 16, will the father be charged? Um, Again, as we said, Jamaica is a very strange place. You'd not. I'm not saying other places in the world aren't too. It's just that the sexual education is lacking, and so many things happen. We still do have small rural communities, and we do have a lot of situations where we don't necessarily all the time have the type of interventions that we're doing, but I hear that the government is going to take on public intervention and increase restorative justice and community. But I do know that the courts generally take into consideration when a baby is involved, when there's statutory rape, and how to treat the father. And it's a little bit, it's treated a little bit different, and it's sensitive, especially when the age is close in time. So that's a different aspect of it. But this is it's an interesting topic, and I will say this there, you without even questioning anybody. I know there can be some serious discomfort in having the conversation about consent and where the sexual lines are blurred in terms of age. But as I said, I started off with the written song by R. Kelly, sung by the late Aaliyah, age ain't nothing but a number. Um, and if does love play a part in that, and where do we draw the line outside of the law already drawing the lines for us? How much more should morality get into it? And remember, I have asked you, I've asked persons to send me pictures. um Julie Bless says it happens everywhere, and I don't doubt that. We just have to speak in terms of what we know in the particular thing. Right. So we definitely have to think about that when we have the conversation in terms of what better it is that we want for people, and how it is that the law, when should the law intervene, and so we just deal with that accordingly, one step at a time. Yes. But guess what? um yeah, we're right back at it. It's 6:05, and we're still dealing with with it. But there is a strange thing in the criminal law. I don't think I have to say it, but the most difficult thing is for you to say you're raped if, for instance, one has a giant thirst, and for whatever reason, sometimes billboards just find the context of what is to be said. So I await your comments on the context matters in this situation, because I guess exercise matters, but you're to eat your carrots. And if you got a giant thirst, what to do? Juice it. Am I correct? Ian Crook says Canada is another country that is experiencing a shrinking birth rate. Says the hospital is not for the unmarried. I don't know in what context that is. But yeah, here we are having this conversation on consent, and again, context does matter. So if consent matters, in what context? How did I understand what you were saying, what you were consenting to? And then there is a serious question when it comes to the same much sexual maturity that we spoke about, as to whether or not somebody can consent to not consenting. consent to non-consent. So yeah, so blessing, Carlos, big up yourself. Sue says, yeah, same to you, same thing. Big up yourself, Sue, McDuffie. Julie Bless says, when a woman says no, it's no. I'm waiting on those Reggae Global. If you're watching me on the video, as well as Reggae people tune into Reggae Global Radio and the YouTube, your comments on this billboard that I found, and the way in which it's set out. So one has got a giant thirst, and there's a suggestion that you should juice it, and the billboard beside it speaks about the sweat zone. So your thoughts before we go on to consensual non-consent. Right? Now, Tommy, I just want you to give me some context. You said, I think the law in Jamaica is biased towards men. Are you saying the law is protecting women and is against men? Because no means no. But Keisha says some of the women are pressure the man them and abuse them and call them weak man when they don't give in. Yes, weak jellyback man. Because man a man, man for stand up like man, man for strong like man. So yes, context matters where that is concerned. But the law in Jamaica, surprisingly, it defines sexual intercourse as the penetration by the male with the female. So it is actually male centered. So it is actually the man who commits the sexual act. So women can't rape in Jamaica, and only a woman can be raped in Jamaica. So in that case, yes, the law is biased in terms of its protection of women and its criminalization of men only in that context. But yeah, without without further ado, I had asked for the comment on, I will put it up later, but how can you tell if one is mentally mature to say yes or no? That's an easy one. When you're 16, okay, once you're 16, you can say yes. So we have to look at it that way. So, without further ado, if there are no more questions on the issue of consent, and as I said, the position known as a doggy style, it is questionable as to whether rape can be committed in that position. The facts of the case would have to include other means of fear and threat, i.e., holding a gun to somebody's head or whatever, and inviting them to participate. But usually, in the context as you're seeing here with this photo, that position per se would mean that it has to be consensual for it to actually work. Persons would have to say otherwise, but that is the current state of the law by virtue of case law. So rape by I guess doggy style is not something that is realistic, or one could cry in circumstances, unless they can prove that there was some you know gunpoint, knife point, or assistance for it to take place. It's assumed that consent has been given for that to take place. Um, but in that, and speaking about autonomy, autonomy brings about it, especially when we talk about sexual autonomy, is the idea and concept of sexual maturity, the ability to enjoy fantasies, and just basically persons who decide that they enjoy alternative methods to bring their fantasies across. So that speaks about CNC, which is consensual non-consent. So I'm bringing out all of the dynamics so people can appreciate that. Even for the benefit of the JCF, which is the Jamaican Police Force, that when persons enter into the arena about sex crimes, the dynamics are so wide that one should not be quick to judgment in terms of the facts of the case. And I'm not saying persons are to be ignored, but just to deal with the matter as it comes. So consensual non-consent is a kink that has been gaining more attention and popularity in recent years. So the phrase itself might seem like an oxymoron, but it refers to the practice of engaging in sexual activities with a partner where one or both parties agree to give up their ability to say no or withdraw consent. In the context of a pre-negotiated scenario or relationship, simply put, it is a form of BDSM that involves power exchange and role-playing games. Now, the concept. Well, if you before even going into the definition, um, the scope of consensual non-consent, it is crucial to understand the importance of consent in the activities. I just spent a whole hour on it, but it is about permission. So consent is you giving the permission for a specific activity to take place, and it must be enthusiastic, informed, and ongoing, because without consent, any sexual activity is considered non consensual and can be classified as sexual assault, rape, or abuse. So, consent is not only a legal and ethical requirement, but it also the cornerstone of healthy and fulfilling sexual relationships. So, that communication is so significant that, say, Monica still speaks about what if the 16-year-old is mentally challenged, and well, if she's mentally challenged, it doesn't matter if 16, you can be any age. If you're mentally ill and incapable, then you're a person of unsound mind, and if somebody takes advantage of you, they will find themselves in court, and it amounts to rape. So still dealing with this aspect of it, it has to be appreciated that consent is given right across the board in every change of position, every action, every for quality of life, for enjoyable for quality enjoyable sexual activity. It is necessary. um it is definitely necessary for you to have the consent. So the definition of and scope of consensual non-consent, and it sounds like, uh, as I said, oxymoron, but just appreciate that even non-consent has to be consensual. So it's pretty much role playing. So consensual non-consent is also known as CNC or rape play. It involves one partner taking on the role of a non-consenting participant, while the other partner plays the role of a dominant or aggressor. But both parties agree on the type of scenario they want to enact. So the boundaries and the safe words that will signal the end of the scene. A CNC scenario can range from a simple teasing and denial game to a full-on kidnapping and interrogation role-playing. What makes it consensual is the existence of a pre-negotiated agreement between the partners. So where the non-consenting partner is fully aware and willing to participate in the scene under specific conditions. So there was a case in the criminal law, and I think I just remembered DPP and Morgan, where the man told his friends that his wife was consenting and they were going to go home and pretend to rape her and all of that. And out of that came mistake, and the defense of mistake would have come from that, as well as self-defense of another, but the mistake, and whether or not you could tell your friend, let's go home and my wife and role play, and they really think that you have so much control and your wife agreed to everything, that they didn't get consent from her. That is very, very important. Blessing, Valerie. So it is important to note that consensual non-consent is not for everyone and should only be practiced between consenting adults who have a deep level of trust and communication. So it is also crucial to establish clear boundaries and safe words before engaging in CNC. So the scenario to ensure the safety and well-being of both partners. So in that vein now, you can appreciate when the lines are blurred between all of these. All right, I'm missing the comment, power play with safe words. K Mac says, and sons, remember that Ian's son carry one home, give you. All right, let me not read all of this, but yeah, the importance of understanding the lines and sexual education is going to be very important to ensure that you don't find yourself in breach of the law. So again, when you to put everything in context, you have autonomy, which is the ability to make choices for yourself, your intrinsic decisions and the choices that you made, and then you couple that with sexual autonomy. And with your sexual autonomy, it says that I am free to say no, I'm free to make all the choices, and I don't need a third party. And that starts at the age of 16 in the Jamaican context, in the Jamaican law. From that comes the communication, the free will, the expression, and the consent, the contractual arrangement and agreement with two persons. Once you're 16, and any age from 16 to 99, or as long as the person is alive, you can say, yes, I consent to, let's do this. And regardless of how persons feel morally, and there are things, so morally, let me give you some scenarios. You're a high school teacher, or you work somewhere and the person is there, and 16, 17, the moral problem is you use your authority to engage in sexual activities with young people. Yeah, the most that can happen where it isn't rape when the person is 16 is you lose your job and you lose access to young, fresh, and green. But if it is that the person is 16 and it is random, even though you're aware that it's school, morally, people in society saying you shouldn't do it, legally, you can. And that is where the lines are blurred. And that is where there should be questions about changing legislation and the need to do that, since self-regulation, self-check integrity doesn't work for all. There's a culture because we see, no matter what, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, teenage pregnancies, and sometimes a lot of the pregnancy took place even before the person had reached the age of 16. And so that is where the agencies need to have a better communication with the community. And we do have the Child Care and Protection Act, where it is the duty of every citizen, if they become aware of activities like that, to make the necessary intervention when the time comes. Yeah, so that is definitely important when dealing with a topic such as this, and dealing with the situation, ethics of it. K. Sue says, can a woman who is married be raped by her husband? Certainly they can. And Jamaica has made amendments to to improve on it as well, especially because it is a misogynistic society and people are aware of that. So the protection that is afforded of the single woman. There was a time, certainly, when I started the law where the single woman's vagina was the most protected vagina in the Jamaican space. Um, and the law has several changes has been made to the law since that would have made it a little bit more equalities of arms. So much so that there was a time where the common law where the common law a common law union, the woman in a common law union who gets the benefit as being the common law wife could tell her man no, and if him violate, the man would find himself before court for rape. In Jamaica, there was only five circumstances that, and well, still is pretty much five circumstances that you, a woman who is married, can say that her husband raped her, and is if he had an STD, if they were separated, if there was a divorce before the court, um, or you know, yeah. I don't know. I'm not giving you all of them right now, but certainly there had to be circumstances where he wasn't living in the same house or there was an indication of separation. Um, so that's why that's why that is so important. No, I'm actually I am in Jamaica and the time is 5, and I realized that that's what happened, that the time is saying 10 p.m. and that's why persons aren't finding it as fast, but you're correct. It should have been Eastern time, and I think it's set for the 10 p.m. So that's why persons aren't seeing it. But you have the ability to rewatch it, and that's important, that the knowledge goes out and it's there for you to watch, because it's all about context. And everybody knows that my favorite person is Miss Fulcrum from Are You Being Served? So I was looking at I purchased a book, but it was a legal book. And then you go to the bookstores and you generally peruse the books, and you find very interesting books as they go. And I just thought I would share this book with you today because it's a matter for you. But yeah, visually if you can see it, but it says having good censored ain't enough. It's simply a plus. And Miss Fulcrum's favorite animal is on it. So one wonders in what context are they speaking about. And I invite the viewers to to say that to me, to say to me what they think about the title of the book, especially in light of the context that we are speaking about, and the topic about consent and about autonomy, sexual autonomy, and certainly the effects of not getting consent, what would happen. And while you guys look at that, then we can speak, because Ian is saying that um, isn't the marriage license the green light that gives the husband the right to uninterrupted sex anytime on demand? Wow, that sounds like pay-per-view or movie on demand or something like that. But the and some Joe then says the laws were based on biblical principles where the Bible says her body belongs to him and his to her. What a thingy. You hear the man here strong and wrong. And Kevin says if you get a woman with good Miss Fulcrum, you win the lotto. Okay. Are you being served? That is the question. Sir Abe, that's a great question. Jesus says, I found JA to be one of the most sexually expressive yet sexually repressed country. Yeah, you have to elaborate that because what is the um, where's the expressive? You mean in dancehall and carnival only? Hmm. Interesting. I tell you, know. All right, so let us just wrap it up now. Pun intended, right? Um, Notice how we went from there's an assumed idea that consent is given at the time of marriage, but remember, a woman, if you believe that a woman maintains her sexual autonomy, she should be able to tell her husband no. Whether the Jamaican laws are up to date where that is concerned is a different matter. Just places in the world, men can rape their husbands. Um, Men can rape their wives and women can rape their husbands in some jurisdictions. And I think I can say in some jurisdictions, men can rape their husbands too, and women can rape their wives. And so the dynamics changes everywhere. And what is important to know is when we speak about the autonomy, it's just the ability to say yes or no. And whether you're married or whether you're free, the value that you place on the value that you place on your sexual um, sensibilities is what is important. And even why we're speaking about it is in the view that context matters. There's a lot of speculations that happens when things go wrong because especially in the Jamaican space, if a woman is murdered, is a very rare situation, and it always deals with a level of domestic violence coupled with failed relationships. So women who suffer in silence would have given up their sexual autonomy. Even case who is speaking about the expression, the sexual expressiveness in the Jamaican space. That is culturally dressing where the woman, anywhere in the world, you're free to dress how you want. And many times we have to deal with morality in terms of dressing and the freedom of expression that comes with it, which is now a constitutional point. And so sexual expression through dress has nothing to do with sexual activities. Similarly, sexual identity, I think, is so far removed from sexual activity and consent that it is the most confusing aspect. And so sexual education is important. And so there is in the Jamaican space some agreement, Somali agreement, and this thing about public education and the type of sex that they want to teach children without addressing the fact that when you go on TikTok, you're exposed to everything. Similarly, YouTube and the internet is there, and not all parents are technologically savvy to be able to prevent their children from seeing the alternative methods of identifying sexual intercourse through video. Not necessarily even TikTok, even X, and what these sites can expose you to through inboxing and messaging and DMs or whatever you call it, and just even a book that says having good censored ain't enough. It's simply a plus. And when do we put in context when somebody speaks of the word cocky? Um, are we speaking about an ego? What are we speaking of? What are we speaking about? When Miss Fulcrum speaks about her pet and makes reference to it, the dictionary definition, when is it a bad word? Because notice in Jamaica, I think it's like $1,000 fine that you have to pay when you curse a bad word in the public, and people make a big thing about it. And the words which are bad words are good words in other countries. First world countries, freedom of expression is real. In Jamaica, it isn't. Um, Miss, yeah, I say fulcrum and somebody's correcting me and making me know. You need to know the full context. It's Miss Slow, Miss Slowcrum. Yeah, thank you for that, Keisha. But I've been saying fulcrum because I'm more concerned with Miss Slowcrum's favorite cat that she makes reference to pussy that I didn't even remember her name. Right. So that's it. And so the book says having good pussy ain't enough. It's a plus. So when you go to the vet, you have to ensure that if you're going to buy a pussy, is it a Siamese? Is it a full bred? Are you bringing home a lion? Are you bringing home a tiger? Are you bringing home a house pet? But certainly the waters change if you find yourself in Portmore at night. I don't think you're buying Miss Soulcrumb's perfect pet, and consent may be an issue, and you might find yourself before the court because you obviously at that time gone to buy the wrong animal. So language is very important in understanding the full crumb of the slow crumb. I think I got that one right this time. Yeah. And so that is definitely what we look at in terms of finding is the book empowering for women? Yeah, because the book, let me get to the book. Here's the thing about this book now, right? And I just gonna have the book up. Um the book, all right, let me just add this and also see if I can. Yeah, all right. So the book is there. All right. Is it empowering for women? Of course, it's empowering for women because one needs to know. So there is, I think the show was called Westgate, and it speaks about um, Miss Slocum. Keisha not coming off of it, Miss Slocum. I'm gonna find a video, and I invite persons to find a video of Are You Being Served, because I need to show people who Miss Slocum is. And Kevin, no, the book is about empowering women to find higher value about themselves rather than pets. Yes. So what? You see, Keisha being bad. Oh boy, this is a genuine laugh. You guys made my day today, and I want to thank you guys for that. Genuinely. But back to the matter at hand. Um, yeah, in terms of context, the what we have to appreciate more than anything is to understand about empowering yourself through autonomy. If you, it's only somebody who take public transport in Jamaica, whether you're a woman or a man, can appreciate what it feel like, especially when it's not the police that tell you if you go up in the truck back during a state of emergency, how the conductors and the loader men rob you of your autonomy to put you in a motor vehicle to take you where you're going. It's just in that moment there is a violation of a person's autonomy where you are forced, when you're forced to do it and you don't do it wigglingly, when that takes place, that is the type of autonomy. And so you're not supposed to also put too much value on one part of the body, but rather than the appreciating the ends and not the means. So if you believe that rational beings have the ability to say no, it's about the respect. Yes. Yes, Christopher. Miss Slocum is from Are You Being Served? And we need to bring back that type of humor where we had, I grew up on Benny Hill and Are You Being Served and Murder She Wrote, and these were things that allowed persons to think critically, allow persons to be witty, to have sarcasm, to practice satire, to develop themselves properly, to be fully read. What they have now, in terms of content, is just fast paced nothingness that cause persons to be a little bit lacking in critical thinking. So people can't appreciate. So when um we hear words, we chuckle because the words have to do with body parts, and body parts cause persons to be a little bit embarrassed, and so we lose sight of real issues because we get distracted by sexual overtones. If I'm saying that right, and I have put it in context, so I know I'm saying it right. But to know that we must get to a certain sexual maturity so that the boys will understand that women can dress however provocative that they want to dress because they have sexual autonomy, and you're still not is not an invitation to rape. So we won't have to teach our girls to not dress provocative so that they don't get raped, but that our boys can appreciate that it's not an invitation to rape. And they don't have to take the other extreme because of social pressures that they can't even interact with women the way they interact, the way they're supposed to. And when they take alternative sexual lifestyles, we then at the same time says that society is destroying our men. And then you'll appreciate when there are different role models through artistic abilities that nobody's cursing them, but they have a problem when they have a problem with freedom of expression through musical words, and then the lines are blurred. So it's you can't trouble one set of people, but you can condemn the other set, and it becomes very confusing without dealing with the issue. And the issue is in Jamaica, when after 16 is sex time, and teaching about when to say yes and when to say no and when to respect it, and the concept of age ain't nothing but a number, going down ain't nothing but a thing. The love that I have for you will never change. Here I am, there you are. Your eyes are calling me to your heart. All you got to do is knock, and I'll let you in, and you'll feel the passion that flows within. I don't need to be bold, but I have to let you know I got a thing for you, and I can't let go. And let me tell you something, age ain't nothing but a number. But consent is the most important thing. Otherwise, you'll find yourself in a court answering to how you're wicked and take advantage of the little picnic, where consent is lacking. Hmm. So there you have it. So Georgia Lynch says that the church sister coming from church fully clothed and the nurse coming from work are raped. The rapist is the problem. Yes, but it's not just the church sister. The lady of the night who is leaving back road in her Louis Vuitton top and her Versace um, bikini bottom that probably looks like lingerie. She's also exposed to the same thing, and so the moral dilemma that we face is when one person is saying, "Oh, the church sister and the nurse. What about the teacher and the lawyer and the dancer and the exotic dancer and the lady of the night? They can do whatever they want. And is it only when carnival time come you can parade up and down the street in your bath suit? Or if you are decide as a woman you're going topless, is that an invitation for somebody to come and touch you? No. not without consent. And that's what the purpose, that's the context at which we are speaking about sexual autonomy. And it's the same thing in the Jamaican space. Women do it, women equally, but it as Keisha would have said, if you as a man resist, and I can tell you, we have that problem in Jamaica, and here's what I mean. How interesting it is. In Jamaica, if you show up at the police station and say a woman pressuring me for sex, them run you out of the police station and tell you, say, listen, what happened to you? And then preachers get up and say, man, a man, man for stand up like man, man for strong like man, you can't be no weak jellyback man. And there is a animalistic expectation of the man. And so even when you come looking like, let me bring back this one, looking like age 38, you expect a woman's child to say, yeah, you should go for that and leave age 25. But that is put in context. And so Angel says, so where is the line drawn? The line is drawn clearly within the law. 16 is where the line is drawn. But I can tell you this, if we are to have proper sexual education, if we're supposed to teach our boys that no means no, even for them, for men to respect their sexual autonomy equally as women, so that a woman, you can be standing in the line and a woman can come and touch your body part and say, oh, you're buff, man. And it's not seen as a sexual violation. But if a man does it, he's in the court for sexual touching. It's about equality of arms. It's about recognizing sexual autonomy, recognizing autonomy to be the right to say no, the right to make decisions for yourself about your body. Yeah, that's really what it is. And then we can have more proper sexual conversations in the privacy with your partner, so that people are comfortable, because there are women right now who want to use condoms who don't, because they can't have expression with their sexual autonomy. Similarly, men. And the result of it is a lot of things. Similarly, men who say they don't want to use condoms, don't have the conversations, and don't go and get tested, and don't have that type of ability to have informed consent, so that you can say to your partner, this is what I like, including CNC. I like role playing, and therefore we should sign a contract and we should do it like this. And then Keisha gives us the old adage, wrap it up, which is I'm sure is a commercial in the space. But just appreciating the dynamics and dealing with it accordingly is what gives you the ability per se to be able to appreciate when if at all, no matter what your moral position is, to also respect autonomy. And if you respect our rationality as a part of what makes up autonomy, and deal with people as an ends and not as a means, as Immanuel Kant suggests in his philosophy, and then that type of respect will have us be able to more focus on the 15, 14, 13s and the children who are being molested by persons in authority. And then the media won't protect a school who is literally being investigated for sexually molesting young men. And it is so taboo that it is allowed to happen in the Jamaican space, because we are kind of not dealing properly with the issue of sexuality in the Jamaican space. But it happens. And then we exist in a two Jamaica society. And so if you deal with the context of it, those who are in that part of the society, they protect their own. And what is most important to them is selective morality. because I find it very hard to believe that persons who are put in positions to take care of your children aren't called upon to resign their post immediately upon finding out that under your watch, persons have been sexually molested. But it is more important for somebody who quote dancehall lyrics to be removed forthwith and protect society from words, but not from conduct and action. That is the context that really matters that we need to do. And even though Kevin says predators are everywhere, the point is predators fall outside of consent. And so, if we understand consent and we're teaching consent, children from a young age can know what it looks like and know that I know what consent is. And even if I wanted to, I can't give you consent. And therefore, it's upon me to tell an adult that you are advancing on me. But we don't have these conversations. And so I'm constrained, I'm compelled to use the platform I have to deal with that, so that the same crime monster that we have to deal with comes in so many ways. Because when things happen and we see it in the end, we have questions, why would somebody be so aggressive? Why is the person so angry? What could have happened for you, for the person to do this to a family member, a friend? The crime of passion is so evident. It's clearly somebody that you know. When did we lose the value of life in the Jamaican context? I can tell you, when we started to treat people as a means and not an end, when we disregard rationality, a person's rationality, and not try to find out why the person would exercise their autonomy to do some things that they're doing. And yes, in the church and in the school and all of these places where we expect our children to be protected, they are not. And how we deal with it is of utmost importance. But as the next generation that we need to protect, we need to be able to tell people that you have to speak out. And those who are not at the age to exercise the ability to consent, which is 16, we need to be teaching them, because you are supposed to be taking your book and reading it, so that you know that having what that which is censored ain't enough. It is a plus. So if you take your book and read the contents of the book, so that you know in what context you are to use the power of your censored versus what you have in your brain. That's it. And that the thing about it also is, see, Angel just says, not because it's your uncle, don't sit on their lap, don't be afraid to talk to your children. um you know I not taking shots to anybody, but normal family, those things aren't even a thought or a concept. What changes is when we have this thing where everybody is auntie and everybody is uncle, and the lines are blurred because people are all human beings. But as a nation, as a world, we have a duty to protect the young. If we go back to the first principles and we look at how the animal kingdom works, the herd, the flock, the this, how you protect the young until they're able to fend for themselves, I don't see why it changes in the human race. And I don't see why we're in a rush to make young children adults. I don't see why when children falter. Just last week, I think it was last week, a 14-year-old, yes, he took pictures with a gun, but the conversation wasn't who gave him the gun. When he was executed, people were saying, "Oh, but him take picture with a gun, so him for dead." That kind of conversation is one where we are selective, because here we're having a conversation saying, "Oh, protect them because they can't give consent." then why? Not because the age of criminal responsibility is 12 in Jamaica do we go out and try to treat our young people the way that we treat them. Selectively, we treat them as a whole, as an adult when they're children, and persons in authority said yeah, and then the legislators decide mandatory minimum for them when them a commit capital murder, call them young and them big and bad, and we for lock them away for the rest of their lives. Respectfully, put in proper context, it shows a lack of empathy, shows no compassion, it shows no understanding of the cultural, um, geographical failings of a system. But yet, we have contextualized and have decided that we are able to be independent and free from a monarchy, and should be removed from a part of the Commonwealth because we are old enough to take care of ourselves. But we want to lock away everything we don't like, and we want to seek and destroy by selective, hypocritical, moral fabric and turpitude, and destroy that which has the ability to be great. But my message always to the young is mistakes are there to be made. One not dead, not dash way. And though you have free will, though you have autonomy and sexual autonomy, your destiny is channeled by God. And whether fatalism or destiny or free will is combined, and which come first, the chicken or the egg, or the free will and the destiny, just know that you have a journey to make, a path to take. And yes, if you, whether you're here to procreate or not, you still have to do that one thing that God sent you here to do. Once you have done that, the rest is obiter. The context is what matters. And that's the purpose of this program. And so when Miss Soulcrum, I'm gonna find her, is happy about her pussy, are you happy about yours? And when you go to a billboard and you have a giant thirst, get a juicer and juice it. And don't be afraid of the sweat zone. Um, these are the things, but most importantly, if you consent and she consent, and two persons who are able to consent, then maybe you should consent to getting smaller eyelashes and maybe braces, and maybe at 38 not look like you're 68, and then bad mind won't consume you. Or maybe you should just mind your business. That is the thing about life. Learning to mind your business. Accept that when it is time for you to do your duties as a citizen, that you probably should do it. And that is my charge. And as I say, what for 2024, we are going to find the context, and we're going to strip it down to the bare minimum so that we understand each other. Because if there's nothing I learned from last year and this year, is how important context matters. Because guess what? We are at the 18th of January, far exceed 33 murders. And I guess those who are attorneys can now start to count the casualties of attorneys this year, because they started off by killing an attorney today. That must be alarming. But last week I told you, first it was the Jews, and we didn't say nothing. Then it was the Rastas, and we did nothing. Then it was the little girls, and we did nothing. And then it was the little boys at the boys' school, and nothing is being done. Then it was the Federation man speaking out for the police. Then it probably was this and that. But I tell you, when they come for you, hope that there's somebody who will speak up for you. And that is why we must communicate, we must understand, We must go on a journey to exercise critical thinking. We must disassociate ourselves from fallacies that occurs in logic. And when people use ad hominem, that is attacking the person rather than dealing with the issues, the social ills of society. Um, Here's what I'm saying. Cynthia said it's contradicting, but it's context. Because if you know the context, in the privacy of somebody's bedroom could never be the same as a violation in the public space. They knowing the context of when to mind your business is going to be important, because there's a lot of minding the wrong business. And if you know what business to mind, there is no contradiction if put in the proper context. So that's a response to Cynthia B. And please don't break my vibe. Please don't break my flow. Yeah, when you're ready, But what as I continue to build the context and build the content, every video counts. So if you missed last week, I invite you to go and watch it. I invite you to tell your friends about it. Still working out the the kinks, I will say, in terms of bringing the material to you. But this particular one was done because of all that took place this week, and even this morning on my way to work, to go do law. Uh, Haha. Yeah. In my work, in to go do my business, that is law. And to hear what I hear and saw what I saw in the space that I'm in, I was compelled to come and speak about autonomy and the freedom. And as the information reveals, and violence against women rises, and the misunderstanding of what misogyny is, because there are persons who lack the basic sense, and critical thinking. And it's acceptable, because there are persons who are in spaces before you needed to be educated. There are persons who don't do continuing education. And so they set their standards the way they set their standards. But what I will say to you is that if we major in the minor, we'll only be minor league. And so we have to change that and raise the bar. And so as we remain uneducated and wake up with blank slates, our mission is to educate ourselves with the proper context and start over. And while we increase our minds, and while we educate each other, we're going to see the fallacies and the flaws in persons who think they know that which they know when they do not know not. And you will want to go on the journey and be a gadfly, similar to myself, as Socrates was. But we will not drink hemlock. I promise you that we will not. So we are at the 7 o'clock, top of the hour, and you are tuned into Reggae Global Radio. And this is ISAT with Context Matters. And remember, it's all in life. And you can be several things at the same time. So until next week, people, I am inviting you to watch all the shows, get up to speed with context, share it, tell a friend, and it's 5 to 7 p.m. I'm gonna do better in terms of the advertising, but I do it for the love. I guess I gotta depart from chronics. I do it for the likes too. But what I'm not doing it for is the money. I'm sharing the knowledge because it's something that we need. And the word is love. And yeah, don't be a menace to society in South Central. Blessings all. Later. Yes, sir.